Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. All indications out of Washington right now suggest a military strike against Syria could be imminent. President Trump tweeted as much this morning, warning Syria's ally Russia to get ready because missiles, quote, will be coming, nice and new and smart. Speaking of smart, 5 years ago, in response to the last administration's plans to bomb Syria, Trump tweeted this, quote, be prepared. There is a small chance that our horrendous leadership could unknowingly lead us into World War III. Well, that was a wise response, the kind that could get you elected president of the United States. And yet, here we are, once again on the brink of something whose outlines and consequences are unknowable and terrifying. On Monday night, we spent more than 15 minutes talking about that. We asked what seemed like the most basic questions about a war in Syria, questions the geniuses on the other channels ought to be asking but are not. We're told we must attack Syria in order to punish President Assad for launching a chemical attack against his own people last weekend. It's our moral duty, endless CNN panels have reminded us, to uphold international standards of behavior and punish war criminals like Assad. Okay. But are we sure Assad was responsible for the gas attacks? Many people claim he was. They started claiming that within hours of the attacks themselves, before many of the most basic facts were even known, and they're still claiming it. But where's the proof? They have provided no proof. They've just made loud noises and denounced the question askers. That's not enough. As American citizens, we have a right to know why we're doing this. The second question we asked on Monday was, how would attacking Syria help the United States? How would it help make us richer, or safer, or happier? You'd think our policymakers would keep that question foremost in mind always. They don't. They consider the effect on America an irrelevant consideration, maybe even offensive to consider. They are highly annoyed when you ask about it, like only an agent of a foreign government would want to know how a U.S.-led war might help the U.S. Well, it's easy to understand why other countries might want us to attack Syria. China, for example. They'd be thrilled by it. If you sought to displace America as the leader of the world, you'd want it to weaken its military and go broke. And nothing achieves that faster than a pointless war, as we've proved in the recent past. Again, those seem like basic questions. Nobody bothered to answer them or even engage. We had Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi on the show Monday to talk about Syria. He didn't even try to explain how a war there might help the U.S. Instead, he suggested we were agents of Putin. The rhetoric of the left has corrupted establishment Republicans in Washington, and that's not surprising. The two groups have a lot in common, it turns out. Other pundits and Shays Lounge commanders accused us of disloyalty, too, all without answering our questions. Shut up, they explained. Over at CBS, they responded with ridicule. Stephen Colbert hosts The Late Show on CBS. You might not agree with his politics, but Colbert is not stupid. He's smart enough not to engage in a conversation that might reveal him as a mindless warmonger posing as a liberal. So he talked about pandas instead.
It is unprecedented that the president's personal lawyer gets rolled up by Johnny Law. Everybody is covering this, and that includes Fox News, whose Tucker Carlson last night wasted no time in going straight at addressing our national nightmare.
You know the official story about pandas. They're cute but adorably helpless, which is why they're almost extinct. But like a lot of what we hear, that's a lie. Pandas, it turns out, could easily kill you if they felt like it. Thank God they don't.
Yes. Thank God they don't. And thank God that Tucker is covering what historians will call the pandemonium. Now, obviously, he didn't have time to cover the Michael Cohen raid because he had to talk about this very in-depth report.
Colbert's bit went on for at least 4 minutes. We've condensed it out of kindness, while our original Panda segment lasted for 30 seconds at the end of Monday's show. And yet it's what CBS jumped on, and CNN and a number of other outlets that have spent the last week pushing this administration to war. They have no interest in explaining how bombing Syria might help America. They don't care. And so instead they make fun of pandas. There may be a real case for war in Syria. We'd love to hear it. We've been begging to hear it. We'd love to hear it from Stephen Colbert himself, by the way. He's welcome here anytime, though, of course, he'll never come. So instead tonight we're joined by Noah Rothman. He's an associate editor at Commentary magazine. He called us Russian propagandists and ostensibly patriotic, too. But at least he was brave enough to come and explain himself. Noah Rothman joins us tonight. Noah, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So we have legitimate kind of news on this story. This comes from Reuters. The defense secretary was just asked specifically the question essentially we asked on Monday, the one that you called us traitors for asking, which is, do we know that Assad was behind the gas attack? And this is what the Secretary of Defense just said, quote, We're still assessing the intelligence, ourselves and our allies. We're still working on this. So as with the gas attack last April, the Secretary of Defense, who would know, has not confirmed that we know the Assad government did it. So why am I unpatriotic for asking the same question?
Well, let me say at the outset, I have not called you a traitor. I did not call you unpatriotic. I would
yes,
not
you did.
question.
I have it right here. You called me, and I'm quoting, an ostensibly patriotic American opinion maker who is advancing the geopolitical narratives in defense of a blood-soaked regime that threatens American interests. I'm not attacking you. You were attacking me for asking the most basic of all questions, and it turns out that the Secretary of Defense
well, I believe your questions deserve to be answered, but whether you know it or not, you are advancing pro-Assad narratives, and you should check out Iran TV, Press TV, and the Kremlin-funded network RT to see the favorable coverage you are receiving. I don't believe you're doing that intentionally.
No, but hold on. That's irrelevant to the question.
So let's answer the question.
I don't seek that coverage. The Secretary of Defense has been asked twice directly on this, and in neither case did he, in contrast to propagandists like yourself, say unequivocally, we know the Assad government did this. This is not an ancillary question, it's a central question.
Precisely the opposite. In fact, his comments, he made it very clear that he is not questioning the outcome of investigations like that conducted by the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons or the United Nations Joint Investigative Mechanism, which went so far as to say not only do we find this to be sarin in 2017, but Syria was responsible for it. These are investigations that were conducted and very thorough.
If I can just read, and I have to say, I mean, again, I don't want to be mean to you, and I know you're new to this, but here's part of the Q&A with the Secretary of Defense on the previous gas attack. And he's asked, is there credible evidence about sarin and chlorine? No, I have not got that evidence, not specifically. I don't have the evidence. What I'm saying is that other groups on the ground, NGOs, fighters, have said sarin has been used. We are looking for evidence. I don't have evidence, credible or uncredible. That was the response from the actual exchange. Yeah. I don't know. Is he an agent of Putin, too, for saying that?
I don't know why you would suggest that. He is saying that we don't have assets on the ground in western Syria, which is frankly the truth. Those who have been on the ground in western Syria, again, the OC, the CW, and the United Nations, have established rather definitively that this 2017 attack was a sarin attack. Now, this most recent attack, there hasn't been a comprehensive report because it just happened.
Stop. Nobody is contesting the nature of the attack. That's immaterial. We can determine what the chemical was. The question is who launched it. Because that's the question on which our action turns.
Correct.
If it was launched by rebel groups, then we probably wouldn't attack the Syrian army in response. So who did it is the question. And the U.S. government has not definitively determined that. That's all I said on Monday, and you accuse me of defending a blood-soaked regime.
No, what you said actually is that this was propaganda designed to manipulate the American public opinion, essentially questioning the Trump administration, suggesting that they have misled the public into war, and that is a very strong accusation.
Hold on. I'm questioning anyone who states as fact what he doesn't know as fact. That's it. It is propaganda to say something that you don't know is true and pretend that you do know it's true.
Well, we do know that the rebels do not have an air force. We know that these were delivered by air. We know that they contain they're delivered by canisters. They have been appearing in a variety of different places, which is compression, which is what you need to use a precursor for sarin nerve gas. And those are information that is delivered to us by people on the ground. We do not have American assets in western Syria. So we do rely on other people to provide us this information.
But when you say other people, these are people with skin in the game, in the civil war currently unfolding. And look, I am not here to defend, and I hardly would have to say this with a rational person, the regime of Assad. Why would I? I'm an American. My interest is only in what's best for America.
And we should establish what that interest is.
Exactly. And that's why actors like you and on many other channels and all over the left, you're hearing people say what you said, which is it's unpatriotic or, in fact, treasonous, in effect, to ask these questions. And I'm just saying, how do you account for the fact that the Secretary of State is saying the same thing I said on Monday? Do you think he's disloyal? I mean, that's a real question based on the columns you've written.
No, I say, and I will repeat, that you are mischaracterizing his remarks. He is not calling into question the evidence that has been supplied to the United Nations investigators and the OCW. But if you do want to get into why it is necessary to respond to these attacks in the American interest and not in some vague notions of morality, then we should talk about that, because I agree that the American public has not been informed by the political class as to what American interests are at stake in Syria.
Please don't speak of the political class as if you stand outside it. You are clearly acting as a tool on behalf of people who want the U.S. to proceed with war. And maybe we should. And I keep an open mind because I don't know, but I do know lying when I see it, and you've engaged in it, a lot of others have too, pretending you know what you don't know. So now you tell me why it's in America's interest to wage war in Syria.
2 points. Number one, the United States has troops all around the world. Chemical weapons are relatively ubiquitous and pretty cheap. When Americans come into contact, even casual contact with these, as they did in Iraq, it can affect you for the rest of your life. We do not want to see a future in which chemical warfare has become a status quo of the battlefield, because the United States will come into contact with it and American soldiers will suffer from it. Secondarily, in the last 14 months, there have been 2 state-sponsored terrorist attacks on foreign soil, Russia and North Korea respectively, using weapons of mass destruction, using chemical nerve agents. This is a very dangerous new reality, and we need to stop it now and reestablish deterrence.
I couldn't agree more. But of course, you're arguing parallel to the real argument, which is, how do we respond? And who did this? And so we know that rebel groups have in their possession, there's video of it, since we all trust video now, of them in possession of chemical weapons. So really, if you seek to deter the use of chemical weapons in the future, you'd want to punish the people who use them this time. And as we stated at the outset, and you agreed, we're not sure. So why are we also anxious
I didn't say that, actually. Taking your premise at face value, there is some UN reports that suggest in 2013 that rebel groups, Islamist groups, did get their hands on chemical weapons as a result of the implosion of the Syrian state. And the lesson there is to prevent the implosion of a state that has chemical weapons. If you were to nip this in the bud, as it were, then you would want to make sure you interdict any future possibilities in which rebel groups that we no longer believe are reliable that can get their hands on these weapons.
Right. Well, they're not reliable, which is why I don't want them in charge of Syria, which is why I'm not calling for a war with Syria, in contrast to you. But can we end? We're out of time on this one point, which is, if you want to have an adult conversation about adult issues, wouldn't you agree that it's helpful not to call names, but to engage with the actual questions?
It is. That's why I did not call you names. And I did not dismiss you. I answered your questions directly.
Self-awareness, not your strong suit. But I appreciate your coming on tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.